Hi everyone, it's Niamh here and welcome to my art journaling channel. Today we're doing a piece which is called Stop Thinking, and it's basically all about breaking out of a creative block. I've been really struggling over the last few weeks with a creative block. I've been trying to do things and they just haven't been working the way I want them to. They haven't been flowing as naturally as they usually do, and it's been really frustrating me. And everything that I've done I just haven't been happy with. So I felt the need to create. I just needed to get through this. So this is where this piece has come from. One of the first things I thought to myself was I just wasn't going to think about this piece, because that was part of the problem I was having with a lot of other pieces I was doing. I had a really strong idea of what I was going to do, and I was doing it and it just wasn't working. And because I had such a strong image of what it was going to be in my head, that was really frustrating me, as well as all the other things that I was perceiving to go wrong with it. So with this piece, I just chose to stop thinking. So I just slapped down some gel medium, got my collage papers out and just slapped them all over the page. No thinking about what I was going to do. And it was just really serendipitous that I pulled out that quote on the right hand side, "Stop thinking, just creating." It's a piece of an old art journal page that I copied and printed out, that I've torn up to use again as my collage pieces. So I thought, well, I'm going to use that somewhere on my page as a quote. So I've going over the top of all my collage pieces with gel medium. Now the blue stain you can see is from those blue pieces of paper. They were actually watercolor paper, or they had the Color Blast powders on them, which obviously reacts with liquid or with water, and that was reacting. I wasn't too concerned about that coming off because I knew I was going to add some paints or something over the top. I have no idea, at this stage I had no idea where this page was going. I just wanted to go back to some of the pages I've done in the past where it was just slap stuff down and see where it leads me. So I got out my Dilutions paint and I'm using lime, vibrant turquoise and peony blush. I'm just filling in some of the gaps and trying to blend some of the colours together, filling in some of the areas just to try and tie it together a little bit more, I suppose, and make it look like it flows or it belongs together. So my idea for this, sort of as it was going, or what I've done in the past when I've done these sorts of pages, is to do the collage, to do some stenciling over the top, to add a focal image, and then to sort of finish it off with different bits and pieces. And that's kind of what I was thinking about with this piece. But because I was really in this, I haven't been art journaling the way I want to art journal for a little while, art journaling was really on my mind. And when I was going through my stash of stamps recently, I've got rather a lot of them, I found two stamps from Stampers Anonymous to do with art. So there's this big background stamp, which is beautiful. I think it's by Michelle Ward. It's her kind of architectural style stamp. And I thought, well, instead of putting a stencil in the background, I'll stamp in the background. So I'm using permanent ink. I'm using versified ink over the background and pressing it in, trying to sort of fit in the background. Again, I'm not too concerned if it's not perfectly stamped, because that sort of gives it that grungy look, but it came up quite nicely in the background. I really like the face that's in the background there too. I actually end up covering it up because that's what you do, but I quite liked how it was peeking out. So I was trying to work around what I was going to do with that. So now I'm sort of thinking, well, I've done this background, what am I going to do? There was a few gaps of the stamping, so I just got out this other A stamp that I had that's got some art words written in it, just to fill in those gaps and make it look a little bit more balanced. Now I'm going through a magazine looking for a focal image. So this is just I think it's a Marie Claire that you can see is well chopped up and well loved. There's some figures that I really like, but I've been doing an abstract figures class, and I've been using those as sort of my models for that, so I didn't want to use those. So I'm sort of going through trying to find something that, while I liked the shape of it and it was something unusual, it wasn't one that I was going to use. So I ended up with this woman who's got her legs crossed in an interesting way. But the first thing that I came up against was, well, if she's got her legs crossed like this, I'm going to need to have her sitting on something. What am I going to have her sitting on? The second thing was, what am I going to do with this image? Am I going to use it as a mask? And that's why when I cut it out, I kept the outside area, because I thought, well, I could paint on the inside and do something on the outside. Because I really like that face in the middle, I thought, well, I can put her down and then paint black around it. But then I found this new stencil that I had with the wings, and I thought, oh, she could do quite nicely if I had a pair of wings coming out of her back. So I went through my washi stash, and found this wide washi tape, and I thought that would make a good base for her to sit on. And then I needed to work out how I was going to do the wings. So I used my Stabilo oil pencil just to sort of draw in where the wings need to go, because obviously I'm not going to stencil those in while she's sitting there. Putting out some black paint and using makeup sponge just to gently pounce through it to put the black in. You really don't need all that much paint on your sponge to sponge through. You can see I'm getting quite an opaque look, and I haven't used all that much paint. When you're working on a bend in your book like this, just go really slowly and carefully, and you can kind of make it look fairly seamless. You can see it's bled out a little bit, but not too much. So I was quite happy with how that was looking. And then I decided with the excess paint, I might as well use it up on my page. So I got out my favourite Well Loved stamp with my dots and decided to fill out in the background with some dots, just to sort of, again, get that blended in look to the page. While I was sitting there thinking what I was going to do with this, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the woman. So I decided that I would gesso her just to knock back the shine, and so that I could paint on top of it and make the image more mine, I suppose. It's something I tend to do a lot with magazine images, not because I don't like the image as itself, but it just makes me feel like I've done something to alter that image, to make it belong to me on the page, I suppose, show the hand of the artist in some way, shape or form. So I'm just going back in with my dot stencil and using up the rest of my paint. Again, no really rhyme or reason, just the fact that I had paint there and a sponge, and I thought I'd use it. I'm just using some mixed media glue to glue that down. To be honest, using wet glue on magazine images isn't the best idea. Probably using something like a glue stick would be better, but in this instance it was okay. So I'm just using a Stabilo oil pencil to draw in sort of the main features of her face and of her dress, just to give it, again, that hand-drawn look. If I was doing this again, I would probably use a waterproof pen. I've got a pen with carbon ink in it, which is very fine. It's great for sketching over, but once you add water media to it, it doesn't bleed. So if you're concerned about, you know, being water activated again, using something like that you know is not going to bleed out, even a fine Sharpie pen would work well. Just will help you make sure when you paint over it, it's not going to go anywhere. I thought I'd add in some colour into the face again, even though I quite liked her white. And I'm just using the Jane Davenport's mermaid markers to add in some colour. I think this colour is called Jellyfish. It's a great shading colour. One thing you do need to be really aware of is painting over white paint or white gesso with these. They look really intense when you first put them down, but they do dull down. You can see that happening almost immediately on the hair. It sort of soaks into the paint, it soaks into the paper, and gets really, really translucent again. So I thought I would add some colour to her dress, so I decided to do a blue dress and add that in. And because I'm doing it, I made the dress slightly more modest. Made her look pregnant though, I don't know how I managed that. So I'm just sponging off the excess paint and then going in with another colour. I think this one's called Beach, again with the mermaid markers. And what you'll find particularly with the white paint, it starts to go a little bit patchy. It's just a different look. It gives you a bit of texture to what you're doing. Some people don't like that effect, and that's fine. You may find if you repaint over it that if you paint with acrylic paint or watered down acrylic paint, you won't get that patchy look. So I've got some old grunge board that's been sitting around for years in my stash, and I've got my liquid acrylic ink, which is, I think, Amsterdam brand. So I decided to make that gold. I'm just edging around the edge of my chipboard with a black marker just to hide those cut edges so she can have a bit of a crown. And I'll pop that on her head. So because the ink was quite wet and there was a bit much of it, when I heated it up it bubbled. If you don't want that to happen, just don't heat it up. Leave it aside to dry, and that won't happen. So at this stage I'm sort of just thinking around. I had this stamp that I suppose was in my head that I wanted to use on this page. To be honest, I wished I hadn't now, but it worked out in the end. So it's a stamp that says art is just another way of keeping a diary. And I just wanted to remind myself why I art journal. Is that stop thinking, just create, and you're doing this as a journal. It didn't really work when I put it onto I had some journal washi tape and I stamped it onto that, but it just didn't look right. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll put some white gesso down and I'll stamp on top of that. But because my other quote was done on patterned paper, it just looked really odd to me having that patterned paper and then having the white underneath. So I went through my collage stash again and I found some more of paper that I had in my stash. This is a scan of the piece of paper. You can see on my right hand side and the left the pages I used to protect my other pages in my journal and all the excess paint that goes off the side. I just scan those and put them in because they're really interesting prints in the end. So I decided to use that and stamp on that, and I'm really glad I did because it covered up that white and just made it look a little bit more finished. And all I did to pop it out from the background to get a little bit was to edge it with some black ink. Because the mermaid markers had died down so much, I decided to go back in with some scribble sticks just to add a little bit more colour in, particularly to her hair, just to make it look a little bit more flowy and a little bit more realistic. And I think I actually get some alcohol markers as well to have a go with that. I also decided on her wings just to outline them with a little bit of silver ink. So this is a really fine silver Posca paint pen. Just to add a little bit of sparkle into her wings and just to define them a little bit more, to bring them off the background, because the background is very busy, as many of my backgrounds are. So this is near the end of the process. I'm just going in and putting some sort of silvery strands through her hair. And this is the carbon ink pen that I'm going over with. Unfortunately, it wasn't working brilliantly. I've recently had to change the cartridge and it was just scumming up a little bit. I hadn't cleaned it out well enough. So I do go back in with the Stabilo oil pencil because I knew I was finished with my wet media now, and just adding in those extra little bits of detail. Now I haven't water activated this on this page. If you wanted to add a little bit more shadowing to the image, you certainly could get a wet paintbrush and just add a little bit more water to it. I'm just going in with a Posca paint pen just to do the whites of the eyes, just again to pop them out and put a little bit of shadowing on her face, or sorry, highlights on her face to bring them out again from the background. And this is going in with the alcohol marker on the hair just to add a different shade and some shading to her body as well. So that's pretty much the final piece. It broke me out of my creative block up to a point, I have to say. I didn't think about it very much. It was still really frustrating me. It wasn't as natural a process for me. I really had to think about this the whole way through, which isn't something that usually happens to me. I'm usually pretty lucky when I sit with my journal. I just do, and I don't think about it. So I don't know what's going on in my brain at the moment that's making me sort of overthink what I'm doing. But by forcing myself to sit down and just do did certainly help me push some of those creative fears out of my mind. So I'm really interested to find out in the comments below, what do you do when you get creative block? Let me know, and I'm sure you'll help out a lot of other people as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.